Kids Playground.
Hooray!
This is the Deron Harris Podcast. Here's your host, Deron Harris.
What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Deron Harris Podcast. Thank you for joining me this week. How you doing? Hopefully everybody had a solid week this week or this past week. I had a pretty good week. It was good. It was not really eventful, but it was a good week nonetheless. I made it to today for another episode of this bullshit. No, I'm kidding. I want to start by checking on everybody's mental health. How is your mental health? I do take another medication now, though. I do have another medication that I'm taking that is helping me to, I guess, focus a little more, focus a little better. I'm starting to focus a little more. For the first week, I really didn't think it was working. I didn't think it was doing anything, but yeah, I'm starting to figure out that it's doing shit. Like yesterday, I got so many things done. I got a lot of things done that otherwise I don't think I would have done. Or I probably would have procrastinated or put off or just lost track of or not managed my time right and got away from it. But yesterday I was able to do, quite a few things. I did all the laundry. I made really nice dinner, and I even made really, really nice dessert too. So I felt accomplished. And today I am starting today off I got about 4 things to do. Today I'm going to do my podcast, which I'm doing right now. Then after this, I'm a DJ, so I'm going to go in the other room and I'm going to try and make a mix. I'm going to try to go and make a 30-minute mix. I think I want to do 30 minutes of just mixing because I haven't really done any of that in a long time because of my mental state or the way that it was. But now I'm starting to, and this is how I know that the medication that I'm taking also is working, is I have interest in doing these things again. Because for a long time I didn't have any interest in doing these things. Now I don't want to say that I'm attributing this whole thing to taking medication because it's more than that. It's my willingness to show up in therapy. It's my eagerness even to show up and discuss what I'm going through with my therapist. It does help. It does help. So I want to say if there's anybody that's out there that is feeling a little down, depressed, you have an anxiety, you're not alone, and there is help out there that you can seek. And you got a friend, if you want to DM me and let me know what you're going through, we can sit here and talk about it. I'll share with you what you should, everything that I'm going through. Because I want you to know that there's somebody out here that actually does care. And it's not just me. There's a lot of people out here that actually care. So today, I want to talk about something that is, it's been on my mind, and I was having a conversation about it with some other parents, and it was whether or not, do we think that the state government, or the governor even, the governor himself, not of just this state, but any state, do you think they should have control over what our kids learn? Or do you think the parents should have control over what their kids learn? Me personally, and this is just me speaking, I want to have the most control over what my kids get to learn in school. Of course, coupled with an acceptable curriculum that's going to benefit my child in the future. I don't want them just going to school and learning what some governor believes that my child should learn. For instance, I'll give you a quick, fast example. I live in the state of Florida. I'm a black person that lives in the state of Florida. I have a black child that lives here in the state of Florida. Now, he's not able to learn about certain aspects of not just American history, but his history as well. Because the governor in this state does not want, or doesn't, how should I put this? He doesn't recognize black history. He doesn't recognize black history as a contribution. Therefore, he deems it not to have any educational content. So he does not feel that it should be taught in any of the schools in Florida. It's crazy that he gets to, in school at least, dictate to my child or anybody else's child what parts of history that they should learn. It's like he picked out the choice parts of history for children to learn. So you can't learn about critical race theory here in the state of Florida. You can't learn about, which is basically history, black history. You can't learn about issues concerning sexual orientation or sexual development, sexual education, essentially. My son will probably never learn about Ruby Bridges unless I teach him. Because if for some reason a child in my son's class finds that content or those stories to be offensive, then the teacher has to stop teaching, has to stop instructing the class, has to stop with that very real and very viable lesson in history. Actual history that he doesn't get to learn about because it may make some other people feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. To put that into some perspective for people, if you don't know who Ruby Bridges was the first black child to go to an all-white school. She was the first child integrated into an all-white school in the United States. And she was a child. And there were people who called her all kinds of crazy names, and she had to be escorted with law enforcement to class. But she held her head up and she went to her white school and she got her education. So to put that into a little bit more perspective, it wasn't, like all these many years. It was, Ruby Bridges is 66 years old. I'm 53. You feel me? That's crazy business that it was that close. We haven't come that far, folks. We are not that far removed. There are a lot of things that I do believe that the state should say, all right, our children should be on task with this, learning that, in competition with these other countries, whatever, but a curriculum for all students, not just students that are behind this line or that line for that matter. Education for all children, the same education for all children, the same effort put into education for all children, the same everything. They learn the same things. Truth. They learn the truth in history. If it happened and we know about it, it should be taught because it is history. Regardless if the governor doesn't like it or doesn't like it. Regardless, it should still be taught because it's history. So he doesn't want black history taught. So I say, and I hate to say this, and I'm not really that guy. I guess I am that guy because I'm going to say this. But plenty of times when I was in school and we were learning about slavery, just the little piece of slavery that they gave us in school, I was hurt and embarrassed and sad. But do you think anybody cared? Do you think anybody would have cared if I stood up and said anything about it? It happened. And it's part of our history. And if I want to know history, then this is going to be part of it. It's going to be filled with hurtful things. It's going to be filled with things that you won't want to accept or you won't believe actually happened. 2 or 3 generations removed of not teaching something, and then all of a sudden it becomes ancient history. This is not ancient history, folks. I grew up in a household of education. My father is a teacher, or he's retired now, but my father was a teacher of like 6 or 7 subjects. Smart as a whip. I believe he was the first person in my family to go to college, to get his education. And he went and got his education just like everybody else, but he went to FAM. My father went to Florida A&M University, all-black college. So did my brother, my oldest brother went there also. But I've had my sister, I think both went to the University of Florida. Well-integrated school. But they went there and they got their education. They learned the curriculum that they chose to learn. That's on the college level. But what happens on, grades, K through 12, where it's really determined by the government what our children learn? What are they going to offer our children to learn in that place? Is it going to be something that's going to be acceptable to us, the parents? Is it going to be something that we're going to be able to vote on? Because honestly, me personally, I don't think any state governor should govern what my child can learn. No one, no state governor, especially when we have a perfectly healthy and a perfectly normal Board of Education in Washington, D.C. Perfectly capable of making an adequate curriculum for children across the country to learn the same things, to be able to learn and have access to the same things, to all pieces of history. And that's really what it's about. It comes down to history, race, and sex. That's what it really comes down to. What you are taught about our history, what you're taught about race, and what you are taught about sex and sexual orientation. There's a lot of things that are happening in not just the education sector that will affect your life, that you're going to need certain things that now all of a sudden I'm afraid my children may not have the opportunity to learn, or other children for that matter. And I think that, and this is what I really do think, and I'm sorry how harsh it may sound, but if you're a little white child and you're sitting in class and the story about Ruby Bridges, and you get uncomfortable about it, you're going to have to suck it up. And I'm sorry, but it's a piece of history that happened. And yes, it's embarrassing. And yes, it's hurtful. But you're going to have to suck it up, just like I had to suck it up. But now, according to our governor, you don't have to suck it up, because all you have to do is say that you're uncomfortable, and then the class has to stop, period. So I hate to be this way, but if there are any black children out here, and I hate to be tit for tat like this, I would just want to, I'm anxious to see this. I'm anxious to see that if a black child says that they are uncomfortable learning about the Holocaust, or George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson, or any of that stuff, any of these people, forget the Holocaust, never mind the Holocaust. I'm talking about George Washington. He owned slaves. So did Thomas Jefferson. He owned and raped slaves. And they don't want that to be told. That's part of history. There's a lot of history that they want to erase. They're trying to erase. Not they, the governor. Period. And I think the thing that I have the most problem with is it wasn't put to anybody. It was a decision that he decided that he was going to make for himself, for my child. So you have taken it upon yourself to decide what my child is to be taught? How dare you? How dare any person, not just the governor. Everybody knows how I feel about the governor of Florida, but not just him, but anybody. How dare you, without consulting me, without saying, hey, now, granted, a lot of people in this state feel like he does. Oh, yeah, we think that's garbage and nonsense, because they're living in a world where people of my ethnic background or racial identity, they're worthless to them. They mean nothing to them. Their thoughts, their feelings, anything dealing with us is unimportant here, and is becoming increasingly more unimportant. We've been grouped together. We've all been grouped together. Black people, the LGBTQ community, liberals. We've all been grouped together by the powers that be in this state and deemed harmful. That this ideology that we all have is harmful. The woke ideology is harmful. Well, that's part of what's happening. He's erasing our history. Our history is what woke is, if you don't understand. Being woke to something is not what he is. It's not in the context, and you could never really stop it. You can't stop somebody from having their eyes open to your bullshit. You really can't. I mean, you can't. So in that, people are going to be forever woke. Okay? Once you are awakened, that's what it is. Once you wake up from this shit is when you start to see. And they want you to stay asleep. They want you to stay uninformed. They want you to stay oblivious, uninterested. As a matter of fact, they want to try and criminalize and demonize everything related to those or this group of people that they have chose to wage their war on. I take it very personally. And one of the reasons I take it personally is because I am very black. And I make no apologies for it. I love being black. I'm always going to be black. And I think if I ever came back in another life, I would still want to be black. Because I love being black. I just do. I just do. I love being a melanated person. Now, I'm not saying that to say that I hate everybody else and other races are inferior to me. I don't feel like that at all. Not at all. I'm just saying I love who I am. And I really do. And I really don't care if anybody loves me or not. But one thing you're not going to do is you're not going to write off who I am as a person, who we are as a people, our contributions that have been made in this country. You're not going to wipe that away. You can't wipe it away. You cannot wipe it away. I look at the railroad tracks, all over the South, and I'm like, man, guess who put those there? You can't wipe that away, not unless you pull up every mile of track down here. You can't wipe it away. You're standing on a piece of history. Every time you stand on some of these railways down here, you're standing on a piece of American history because somebody had to put it there, and those people were slaves. Those people shouldn't be forgotten. They should not be written off into history because one person doesn't feel that it has any educational value. Of course it does. Of course it does. It's how our country was built. And I really hate to even say, and I think I'm going to stop saying our country because it ain't my country. And it's not the people who came from the Caucasus Mountains. It's not your country either. It's the people that were indigenous to here that you're trying to run out of here, which is the Native Americans, which you've all but wiped them out, and the Mexicans who populated lots of California and Texas and Arizona, New Mexico and all that stuff. It was all, and you ran them out of here off of their own property. It's difficult. It's difficult. Now you don't want them to learn about what you did. Now you fight to cover it up instead of standing up in your bullshit. So, I don't know, folks. I mean, if y'all feel like it's the governor's job to teach our children, then man, okay. But for me, I think I want more control in that. I think I want the most control over what my kid learns. I really do. People say, what's your role? What's your role as a parent in their education? What could you, there's a lot that parents play in the education of their children. A huge role that parents play in the education of their children. They teach them things at home that they won't learn at school. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's what a lot of it is going to have to be now, because unfortunately, folks, black and brown folks, we're going to have to teach our children our own history. So we need to keep those stories. A lot of our history here was wiped away. A lot of us don't even know where we came from. We don't know who we were related to. We don't know who was split up at birth. We don't know. Because it was stripped from us. So now, it's our time to document everything about our history and teach our children everything about our history that the schools feels that they shouldn't know. And not only teach it to our children, but to everyone, whether they like it or not. I love what I'm seeing on social media as far as people educating people about black history. Now, so a lot of people is going to scroll right by it. They'll scroll right on by it and whatever because, they'll see this person and da-da-da-da-da. But what I'm starting to see is a lot of people coming out of the woodwork, black people, white people, people that are of neither ethnic background, neither one, coming out and speaking up against what's going on here. I can't remember if it was one of the Dakotas. I can't remember which one it was. As far as the school board, they voted to cut school lunch. I forgot where it was. I gotta look that up. I forgot where it was, but they voted to cut school lunch so that they could ensure that they had breakfast for themselves. That's crazy. Make that shit make sense. Make it make sense. Because apparently that's our responsibility, is to feed these motherfuckers. They don't care. The bottom line is this, folks. The sooner that we understand and learn that the politicians that run on our behalf, that say that they care about us, rarely do they actually care about us. All they care about is their political furtherment. They're just trying to get further politically. Look at Ron DeSantis. I hate to keep going back to this motherfucker, but I do live in the state. But this guy's about to just abandon his state to run for president. He's just going to abandon the state of Florida to run for president so that he can impose his will, or try to impose his will and his ideology on the people of America. I don't think it's going to work. I hope it doesn't work. I hope and I pray, because if it's the other way, I honestly don't have any hope. I pray that America shows up in force and says, "All right, bro, you could get rid of that shit and do that shit down in Florida, but the rest of the country you're going to have to leave alone." I hope America shows up for that. Not just black America, not just brown America, but all of America. All of America needs to show up for that. There's a lot of things that are being taught also in church They claim to be church-going people. A lot of the politicians, they're churchgoers. They're God-fearing people. They're upstanding, and that's a lie. Let's just get that out there. They're not. They every time they say God this or God bless that or so and so and so, God's not looking out for these people. Just so you know, okay. So if you're on the side of those people, just know that God's not looking out for that. He really isn't, because that's not what he stands for. But that's a different podcast. So what do you think, folks? What do you think as a parent? Do you think that the governors of the states, each state's governor, should control what our kids learn in school? I'm going to take a quick, fast break, and when I come back, we'll discuss it a little bit more. This is the Darren Harris Podcast.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson. Action Matters is responsible for the content of this ad.
Attention all women who use Tylenol or other medications containing acetaminophen, including NyQuil or Dayquil, while pregnant. If you or a loved one took Tylenol, Excedrin, NyQuil, Dayquil, and other over-the-counter pain relievers while pregnant, and your child was later diagnosed with autism, you may be entitled to significant cash compensation. Call 800-446-8975 now. A recent study from the National Institute of Health suggests use of the popular pain or cold medications during pregnancy may be linked to a higher risk of having a baby with autism. New and emerging lawsuits claim that manufacturers knew of this risk and failed to properly warn pregnant women of the potential harm for their unborn children. If you or a loved one took Tylenol or other popular pain relief medications containing acetaminophen while pregnant and your child was diagnosed with autism, you may be entitled to significant cash compensation. Call 800-446-8975 now. Don't wait. Time is limited to file a claim. Call 800-446-8975. That's 800-446-8975. 800-446-8975.
This is the Darren Harris Podcast. Now, back to some real ass shit.
Hey folks, what's good? Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Darren Harris. If you're just joining me, today we're talking about whether or not you think, or I think, the governor of your state should be in control of what our children learn in school, and also the pros and cons of the government controlling the education in our country. Okay? So there's some pros and cons that are associated with this, of course. Government controlled education, or federal involvement in education, has been talked about for a bunch of years. But these are some pros and cons that I've just been thinking about and kind of articulated down. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read them to you. One of the pros, I'm going to do the pros, 3 pros, and like 2 or 3 cons, just so that we can kind of get a feel for, or kind of make the decision for ourselves whether or not this is a good thing for us to do, or if this is a good thing for our children. So the pros are, it will eliminate inconsistencies in the system. Federal involvement in education would eliminate inconsistencies in the system that arise when states set their own standards of education. This would create a more uniform system of education across the country. Now, I like that. So I'm not against that. I'm not against the government being involved in the actual planning stages of what our children are to learn. Number two, it would provide benchmarks for students to achieve. The federal government can provide benchmarks for students to achieve, which can help students understand the steps required to achieve a specific answer. That's pretty good. Funding. When federal government provides funding and resources that schools need, it can be a valuable ally. I'm having trouble with what I wrote down. But this is the problem with the last one. Not all that money goes to where it should go. I've watched so many schools, and I used to play school sports. I've gone to so many schools. You go to schools in the inner cities where they don't have nothing. You go to schools out in the suburbs, they got everything. They have everything. There's high schools that have a freshman gym and a senior gym. Those are none of ours. Nothing in our neighborhoods. The cons, though, too much bureaucracy. Opponents of federal involvement in education believe that allowing federal government to get involved with the process will simply muddy the water with too much bureaucracy. Potential for zero oversight. Without the Department of Education, there would be the potential for zero oversight over how standards were implemented at the state level. The abolition of the department would create a network of 50 different standards. I could see that happen. So if there was no government to, kind of oversee education, and down here in Alabama, we ain't learning about that. I don't care how recently it happened. I don't give a damn what happened. We ain't learning about that. And I'm sure other places wouldn't want to learn that either, that part of history either. But all parts of history are important. That's how I feel. Not improving student scores. Student scores in the United States are not improving under the Department of Education. That's the truth. That's some of the cons. So I think that what needs to happen with the Department of Education is this. On the federal level, the federal Department of Education it needs to be overhauled. It really does. They need to sit down and take a long, hard. Well, that's everything. Let me just get it out there. That's everything we have. That's the unemployment system. That's Medicare. That's insurance. That's everything in our country. Everything in our country that matters, there's a fucking problem with. Everything. It can't be easy nowhere. Everything in this country is a fucking problem. You can't go to the bathroom here. You can't learn that. Everything is a problem. You know what I need? What I think really needs? Motherfuckers need to mind their fucking business. Is what I need to. That's what I think needs to happen. My son is going to go to school. We're going to vote on this. It's going to be a mixture of stuff that's standardized that everybody here needs to know what 2 + 2 equals. We all agree on that. And as we get older, everybody needs to know how we got to where we are from where we were. We need to know that. You know what I'm saying? It can't be once upon a time there was these Indians and then there was a bunch of white people. The end. It can't be like that. I'm sorry. It can't be like that. It just can't. And anybody or any system that tries to omit those things should immediately be reviewed and replaced. And that is exactly how I feel about it. And any person that would dare do that without consent, how dare you, man? That's my child. I want my child to know about that. I do. I want my child to learn about Ruby Bridges in school. Okay? How about that? I want my child to learn about Ruby Bridges in school. What I don't want my child to learn about is Christopher motherfucking Columbus. Okay? That's what I don't want. I don't want my child to learn about Amerigo Vespucci. I don't want him to learn about none of that bullshit. It's offensive. Okay? None of that shit. I don't want to learn about Thomas Jefferson. Fuck all of these motherfuckers. Anybody who owned and advocated for slavery, I want my children to know about them. I want them, regardless of how much it hurts, I want my kids to know, because I need my children to know how we persevered through that bullshit. And I need all the white children to know also. I need all the white children to know also, so they can witness, they can understand what we had to go through to be here. Because what's happening now is the hate is so deep at the home level for a lot of things, and that they're learning in their neighborhoods and in their schools how to be little racists from a very young age. On both sides of the coin, though. And the reason why that is because we choose to maintain, literally, the segregation of schools. We really do. We really do. And that's why we don't mix. That's why it's so black and white here, for lack of a better phrase, is because, and really it comes down to we don't go to school together. We don't go to church together. Nothing. I was talking to my wife the other day, and we were talking about it. There's a lot of church here in town. There's church everywhere here. Church, church, church. Every fifth door is another fucking church. It's church everywhere. 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 But if you go into these churches, right? Each church, in this church, it's all black people. In this church, it's all white people. In this church, it's all black people. In that church, it's all white people. And it's like that in this town, and always has been like that in this town. It's always been like that. It's always been segregated going to church. I told my wife, if me and her walked into this church right now, the whole thing would just stop. It would cease to go on. It'd be like, oh my God, what the fuck did you do? You walked in here thinking that you could worship the Lord with us? You know, why would you even think that? Well, maybe because it's the Lord. But that's the thing. It's very segregated. School, church. The only time that we really get together, at least in this town, the only time we really get together in this small town is at the restaurants, when we go out to eat. And that's pretty much it. The fair, the football game, and the weekly Friday night football game, that's it. Other than that, we don't do shit together here. There's no integration here. These people don't hang out with those group of people. Very few people hang out. But here it is very well segregated still. There's a restaurant right next to where I'm at right now. I'm in this building, and 2 doors down, there's a restaurant there. And my wife and I, we went in there to maybe try and get some breakfast one day. And they looked at us like we had 5 heads. And that's the problem. It still perpetuates. It's still perpetuated. And that is why we need to learn about these things in school, because that's what they're really being taught at home. They're being taught how to hate when these things can teach them how not to. That is why this is important. Do you understand, folks? That's why it's important that we learn about Ruby Bridges. That's why it's important that we learn about slavery. Everybody, not just little black children, not just little white children, but little Mexican children, little Indian children, little Asian children. That's what I would like to see. I'd like to see a classroom of all those different faces. I would love to see that. That would warm my heart so much, learning the same things, learning about their own culture as well as the culture of the people that they're surrounded by. That would just warm my heart like you would not believe. where the Latins could learn about the Asians, and the Indians could learn about the blacks, and the blacks could learn about whoever. We could all learn about each other and learn, most importantly, how to respect each other and our space and the struggles that we've all been through. We've all had to struggle. You know, I know white folks, when y'all was up in the Caucasus Mountains getting y'all shit together in the cold, I know it was rough out there in them cold days. Just like for the Africans, it was rough out there in them hot days. Feel me? We all have gone through something. We've all gone through it. Leave people alone. Live in harmony. Learn the truth. That's really what it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to, is your willingness as the student to seek out the actual truth as opposed to what's being kept from you. Okay? So I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Deron Harris Podcast. Join me next week. We'll be talking about, I don't know yet either. I'd like to thank my mother for teaching me how to read. My mother, before I go, let me just share this with you folks really fast. My mother taught me how to read. She sat me down in front of Captain Kangaroo and taught me with a box of flashcards, and she taught me how to read. And that's one of the things that I've always been the most grateful for, is the fact that I had parents that were concerned about my education. I had my dad for like 4 classes. I got in trouble at home for shit I fucked up in school and vice versa. But he cared about my education. He cared whether or not I was educated. He cared about what I learned. You know, he knew the impacts of things that it would have on me. And don't get it twisted. My father is a black man from the South. 80 years old, 85 years old. Black man from the South. My dad has been through it for real. Not this bullshit that everybody here is walking around, trying to identify and analyze. No. My father was a black man in the South in the 50s. Facts. So I look at my dad and I thank my father for every piece of my family's history and the history of our country that he was there to witness. Everything from his perspective. I am super grateful that he has shared these things with me, because otherwise I would have never been taught them. This has been the Deron Harris Podcast. Like I said, I want to thank my parents, my mom and my dad, for educating me. I want to thank my wife for being the best wife in the world. I want to thank my best friend, Jesse Yandel, and my producer, Gentry Thomas, for giving me the opportunity and encouraging me to do my podcast. And of course, I want to thank all of my listeners, the people that are continuing to listen, the people who have not yet listened but will, and also the people who have listened and no longer listen. I still want to thank all those folks out there. I do appreciate you. And yeah, that's it. Let's do it again next week. I'll see you next Friday. I guess. I think my podcast comes out on Friday. I don't know. Somebody needs to let me know when it comes out. I think it's Fridays. So, if you guys are around Friday, I'll be around Friday. But until then, you folks have a great week, and I'll be seeing you. Peace.
You've been listening to the Deron Harris Podcast. Subscribe to the show, give a good rating, and everything you need to know is at DeronHarris.com.